on MSNBC. Top secret, no more waterboarding, sleep deprivation, and confinement with insects. These are some of the Bush administration's CIA interrogation techniques detailed in a newly released memos. Let's get right to NBC News Justice correspondent Pete Williams. Pete, what else can you add to this?
Okay, these are memos that were prepared during the Bush administration authorizing the CIA to use specific interrogation methods. We're learning some of them for the first time in detail. Against Abu Zubaydah, for example, the CIA asked and received permission. They said he had a fear of insects, and they wanted to put an insect in his confinement box. But it would be harmless. They said it would be something like a caterpillar. And it's interesting the kind of details these memos go into. The Justice Department said it's okay to tell him that these insects might sting him, even though they wouldn't. But if you say that, you have to say that if they did sting him, they wouldn't cause permanent injury or death. That's the kind of legal strictures the CIA was operating under. They specifically say that waterboarding induces a feeling of suffocation and panic, but they go on to say that they don't believe that it was illegal as torture because it would not cause any permanent injury. And one of the things that these memos say is that waterboarding had been used against Americans in training, and therefore it was legal and wasn't illegal to apply against someone else. It also talks about something called walling, in which a false wall was constructed. The individual had, in essence, one of those sort of so-called sea collars that people take on the plane to sleep with that holds your head, and then they would be slammed repeatedly up against the wall, and this collar around them would prevent any whiplash, but the noise of that would cause shock. They could be slapped in the face. They could be held like this, immobilized. They could be slapped in various places, sort of shoved around the room. All these things were authorized by the CIA. Now, what Eric Holder, the Attorney General, said in releasing these memos is, first of all, the administration has repudiated all these techniques. Secondly, any CIA official, operative, contractor, agent, officer who carried out these techniques under the legal permission that he was given will not be prosecuted. The government will represent them if they're sued, and if there are any money damages, the government will pay those. He said it's simply not fair to look back under the standards of today and prosecute these people when they were given the legal permission of their government and orders to do what they did. And then President Obama, in a separate statement, said, this is time to look forward. It's not time to look back with retribution. We have to learn from our mistakes, but not punish those who did what they were told to do back in the Bush administration. Now, this is these memos have created a great deal of different kind of reaction. Human rights groups are criticizing the president for and the Attorney General for saying they won't prosecute the CIA. Pat Leahy, the chairman of the Judiciary Committee in the Senate, is saying this just shows that he ought to have hearings to try to get to the truth of what happened. Other members of the Senate are saying that they want to have hearings about this. So this is certainly not the end of the matter, but what's interesting is that while there are small redactions in places in these memos where things are blacked out, in the main, as you can look through these things, most of this is in the clear, and there was a big debate within the administration about just how forthcoming to be. The president says today, you know, I think we should be forthcoming about these memos, but that doesn't mean that I'm not going to respect the classification of the intelligence community, and don't assume that I'll be making all this stuff public.
The 1940s have been a decade of breakthroughs and developments in medicine and psychiatry. Scientists have developed a new technology to cure mentally ill adults. With the use of electroshocks, the minds of sick patients are being wiped clean, giving them a fresh start. On this blank slate, physicians then imprint a new, healthy personality.
Remaking people, shocking them into obedience. This is a story about that powerful idea. In the 1950s, it caught the attention of the CIA. The agency funded a series of experiments. Out of them was produced a secret handbook on how to break down prisoners. The key was using shock to reduce adults to a childlike state.
It's a fundamental hypothesis of this handbook that these techniques are in essence methods of inducing regression of the personality. There is an interval, which may be extremely brief, of suspended animation, a kind of psychological shock or paralysis. Experienced interrogators recognize this effect when it appears, and know that at this moment the source is far more open to suggestion, far likelier to comply than he was just before he experienced the shock.
But these techniques don't only work on individuals. They can work on whole societies. A collective trauma, a war, a coup, a natural disaster, a terrorist attack puts us all into a state of shock. And in the aftermath, like the prisoner in the interrogation chamber, we too become childlike, more inclined to follow leaders who claim to protect us. One person who understood this phenomenon early on was the most famous economist of our era, Milton Friedman. Friedman believed in a radical vision of society in which profit and the market drive every aspect of life, from schools to healthcare, even the army. He called for abolishing all trade protections, deregulating all prices, and eviscerating government services. These ideas have always been tremendously unpopular, and understandably so. They cause waves of unemployment, send prices soaring, and make life more precarious for millions. Unable to advance their agenda democratically, Friedman and his disciples were drawn to the power of shock.
The subject should be rudely awakened and immediately blindfolded and handcuffed. When arrested at this time, most subjects experience intense feelings of shock, insecurity, and psychological stress. The idea is to prevent the subject from relaxing and recovering from shock.
Friedman understood that just as prisoners are softened up for interrogation by the shock of their capture, massive disasters could serve to soften us up for his radical free market crusade. He advised politicians that immediately after a crisis, they should push through all the painful policies at once before people could regain their footing. He called this method economic shock treatment. I call it the shock doctrine. Take a second look at the iconic events of our era, and behind many, you will find its logic at work. This is the secret history of the free market. It wasn't born in freedom and democracy. It was born in shock.
Isolation, both physical and psychological, must be maintained from the moment of apprehension. The capacity for resistance is diminished by disorientation. Prisoners should maintain silence at all times. They should never be allowed to speak to each other.
There's one other thing I've learned from my study of states of shock. Shock wears off. It is by definition a temporary state. And the best way to stay oriented, to resist shock, is to know what is happening to you and why.